So they get that.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm not too sure if I was supposed to be
Currently, recovery support services are being.
My name is Joseph Sanchez. I'm a person in long-term recovery since October 2nd, 2005. I have been providing
dialogue.
recovery coaching since 2006 and training recovery coaches and trainers since 2009. Super passionate about it, and I hope it comes across.
So why is it also important? Because we're being watched.
Well, slides. Well, it's recording, so.
That's right. That's right. So, the take home is that you are a peer recovery support specialist.
So just a little bit about this session. It's about peer recovery support specialists, the roles, training, and supervision. I prepared a slide deck, but I really know that there's a lot of confusion and a lot of questions out there in the state, so I want to allow for that and it to be really fluid in this hour and a half. I don't know how much time I have. So hopefully, these are our learning objectives for the session: to discuss the various roles and misunderstandings around them here in the state, describe the type of training, supervision, and certifications that are available, and listing the workforce or leadership roles that a peer recovery support specialist should be playing as we move towards a recovery-oriented system of care. So I want to start off with the term peer. And it's very important that we understand what that peer role is, or that peer, what that peer means in our peer recovery support specialist title. A peer provider, a certified peer specialist, or a peer recovery coach is a person who uses his or her lived experience of recovery from mental illness and or addiction, plus skills learned in formal training to deliver services in behavioral health settings to promote mind, body, recovery, and resiliency. This is a definition by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And I bring that up because a lot of organizations that are training, they have this question: do we open up our training to people that aren't in recovery or don't identify as peers? Well, if it's a peer training, then who do you think should be trained? Right? Peers. So who is being trained in Texas? The slides, they don't translate to the Mac, and so they may be a little wompy. Get with me afterwards and I'll send you my slide deck. Not a big old problem. So who's being trained in Texas? We're looking at peers in substance use recovery, in mental health recovery, allies and friends, family members, church members, and licensed professionals. Why do you think some licensed professionals are being trained?
Job market.
Job market? What was it called?
Maybe they themselves are in recovery.
Maybe they themselves are in recovery. What else? Any other ideas? Organizations are having their LCDCs and their clinicians trained so that they understand the role of a peer recovery coach or peer recovery support specialist. Now, in this training, if you've been through the training, who's, show of hands, who's a certified peer recovery coach or peer recovery support specialist or peer specialist? Good majority of us, okay? So if you've been through the training, you know that there's a part of the training where we discuss role integrity, right? How us as peer providers aren't operating in that hula hoop of a clinician or a licensed counselor or anybody like that. And so there's hopefully clinicians that do attend any kind of training get that understanding as well. And also too, it helps to make sure that we're operating ethically. You know, we don't want a recovery coach to be doing coaching or doing any kind of groups and it being billed as a clinical service. Because that's That's no bueno. That's bad business, right? But it doesn't mean to say that organizations aren't doing that, but
and it's getting better, but, you know, we need to have that clarity as well. So, in the world of acronyms, we hear your PR, PRS, PRSS, CPS, PRC. It's confusing. I've had some trainers contact me. So when we go for this certification, are we what are we? What are we? And that's, you know, I'm here to kind of help, hopefully, clarify that. So we'll start the conversation off with the Certified Peer Specialist, the CPS. In the mental health sector here in Texas, the organization that certifies and trains their peers is Via Hope. So currently, as their curriculum stands, it's a 43-hour curriculum. They do require a written exam, and the certification is for 2 years, and in the span of 2 years, 20 hours of continuing education is required, and usually that training runs about $500. I got in contact with the mental health provider, and they said that 537 certified peers, there are 537 certified peer recovery support specialists in the state of Texas. And their average pay is about $14.15, and the average work week is about 31 hours. So this is a combination of both volunteer hours, well, they can't account for the volunteer hours, but this is mainly for part-time and full-time employees in the different areas that have those mental health peers. And with SU peers, with the substance use peers, our certifying body is the Texas Certification Board of Addiction Professionals. If I wrote that out, it would have kind of clipped off of the side. Anyway, so TCBAP. TCBAP is our credentialing board. The curriculum that currently is being approved or accepted by TCBAP is the DSHS, that's the Department of State Health Services curriculum. I know that there still may be in existence, there are other curriculums out there that train or purport to train peer recovery coaches and peer recovery support specialists, but there's only one curriculum that is approved, sanctioned by the Department of State Health Services. Why do you think that there's only one curriculum that is approved?
So the state can make more money off of it.
Okay, that's one, so the state can make more money. Mary, you had something up there?
No, I said then there's that.
Yeah. So if we are certifying peers, we want to know what they're being trained on, right? And I believe the state wants to make sure that peers are being trained correctly, and they're being trained on material that's pertinent to their jobs, right? Yes, ma'am.
In the curriculum, there's a really strong emphasis on ethics, and I know that statewide there's been some unethical things occurring, and so that's a big concern.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, there is an emphasis on ethics, and we'll talk about why some of those situations are popping up on the radar, especially here in the past couple of years. So the curriculum is 46 hours long. We also need, for certification purposes, 500 hours of paid or volunteer work experience, specific to those 4 domains that are peer recovery support or recovery support, ethics. What else? Advocacy, and one more. Role model or mentorship. Okay? So those 4 domains. So all of these hours that we do, those 500 hours that we do, need to fall in those 4 domains. Also 25 hours of supervision. We'll talk a little bit about supervision a little bit later, about what that looks like, what that should look like. And an online exam, since the Texas Certification Board of Addiction Professionals, they are a a board member of an international accrediting board, ICNRC, which is the International Certification and Reciprocity Consortium. They take an online exam that's through ICNRC, and with a passing grade, you're able to apply for that certification. Also with like the mental health certification, it's 2 years long and also takes 20 hours of CEUs within those 2 years. And the cost for training varies from $200 to $300 depending on organization. Some time ago, it was more than that, but the Department of State Health Services, they asked the organizations to make it affordable to the people that are taking it. So they asked for a cap off at that $300. So if you see training for more than $300, it's by organization, by individual discretion. Any questions on that? So talking about money on the substance use side, recovery people, we sent out a survey surveying all the peer recovery support specialists and peer recovery coaches and peer recovery blah, 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 because all we have is a whole bunch of different titles. And we said, how much money are you making? So in this slide, if you can't see it, a huge portion, this red portion, are making about $12.50 to $17.50 per hour. Again, this is ranging from anywhere of part-time to full-time employees. Volunteers, there's a good 29% chunk, right, that aren't getting paid because they're volunteering their service, which 29% is pretty good for volunteerism, pretty good. And then a 10% that say that they're getting a little bit less than $24 an hour. And I think that's impressive. I want to work for those organizations, right? How many peer recovery support specialists are certified? Now again, looking at the SU side, the substance use side, we have 871 recovery coaches across the state of Texas. 145 trainers of coaches, and 6 trainers of coaches. Internationally, again, through ICNRC, we got this information. 76 candidates have taken the exam since it was first administered in December of 2013, and 87% of them have passed. Show of hands, who's taken the exam? Okay. TCBAP certified 300 peers recently through their grandparenting process. So prior to the start of that exam, they had this whole grandfathering process where you submitted the certificate that you already had along with the 500 hours of paid or volunteer work experience and those 25 hours, 20 hours of supervision, and you were able to be squeezed in under the radar and didn't have to take an exam. That ended in September of that year, and so now everybody's having to take the exam. We know that since that grandfathering period has ended, there's been a steady flow of people taking the exam from Texas, and we make a little over 80% of the people that are certified through that that exam. 80%. Well, Texas is huge, right? And we're doing a lot of great stuff. And so we're seeing a huge spike internationally on those numbers. So good job to Texas. So just kind of looking at the overlaps. So on our left-hand side, you're going to look at see mental health peers. The right side, substance use peers, and in the middle, the overlap, some of the stuff that's happening that's the same. Via Hope is a certifying board. It's one organization for the whole state of Texas for mental health peers. I mentioned that. They do have statewide recognition. There's a lot of organizations across the state that recognize a Via Hope peer support specialist. They operate in state hospitals and in other places as well, but state hospitals seem to be more common with mental health peers. Community health centers as well, they're more common, and they're billable by insurance, which is huge, right? SU side, we're trying to work towards that, especially here in Texas, since we didn't expand Medicaid. Go Texas, woo! And mental health courts. On our SU side, we have our body of Texas Certification Board of Addiction Professionals that certifies. The training is TCBAP recognized, and residential recovery community centers you can find peer recovery support specialists in or peer coaches in. Family drug court, we're huge in family drug court. It's really awesome to see our coaches out there advocating for the people that they're working with. DSHS approves of the curriculum and is heavily involved in the curriculum. I'll talk a little bit later about how involved they are in that curriculum. And if an individual gets certified through TCBAP or even become a designee through TCBAP, then whichever organization that they are working for, they're able to access DSHS money. So if Joe Schmo gets certified through some other curriculum and tries to get a job with an organization that receives state funding, that individual would have to go through the DSHS approved curriculum. And again, it's to make sure that they are trained on the curriculum that they know, that they're familiar with, and that they're being trained on appropriate material.
Joseph?
Yep.
The insurance billability and the mental health peers, is that managed care and Medicaid? Are they Medicaid reimbursable?
I'm not too sure on that. I know that Medicaid was not expanded here in Texas.
Yeah, but there's that waiver that states use.
Right, so I think they are. I'd have to do more research on that. My hula hoop is on the SU side, so I actually had to do a little bit more research on the mental health side. And I think as monies start to come together, we're going to see a lot more overlap on where MH and SU peers are being found. So thank you for that.
I mean, just that's good to know, because if it is Medicaid reimbursable for mental health, there's an argument for the substance use peers to have Medicaid reimbursable.
And we actually, if you weren't aware of this, there's a bill that we kind of proposed that kind of died on the floor, but we're going to bring back that will actually pay for peer recovery support services like recovery coaching. And that just takes a lot more education to the community and our clinical cohorts. So in the center we have both curriculums that are DSHS recognized and have statewide recognition. They do have reciprocity with other states, but if I'm certified as a mental health, if I'm certified through Via Hope on the mental health side and I want to move to Louisiana, they may not recognize, because their board is IC and RC, they may not have reciprocity. But their mental health provider, they may have reciprocity with that mental health provider, and vice versa. Also, too, you can find those peers in recovery community organizations and treatment centers and in housing. So we get to some of that confusion around all those acronyms when we talk about peer recovery support services. Recovery coaching is a peer recovery support service. So what that means is that recovery support services are social support services designed to fill the needs of people in or seeking recovery. May be difficult to see from where you're at, but we talk about the different types of support: emotional, affiliational, instrumental, and informational. This is put out by SAMHSA, right? And then it goes on to describe what those supports are, and also to what those service examples are. So if all of this are recovery support services, we have that peer mentoring or peer recovery coaching. Peer recovery coaching is part of those recovery support services. So recovery support services are this umbrella. Recovery coaching is one of these little hang downs under this umbrella. So we do a whole bunch of different services. So that brings up the question, what are we being trained on? What are we being trained to provide? If this certification is for a peer recovery support specialist, then you should be providing peer recovery support services, right? One of those services happens to be recovery coaching. So if you have gone through the curriculum, ask yourself, what are you being trained on? And what are you being certified for? Currently, we have peer recovery support specialists, right? The certification that everybody's getting these days. These are some of the things that should be happening. Recovery coaching, group facilitation, job readiness training, transportation, parenting classes, monitoring. So these are some of those hang downs from that big umbrella. But the current curriculum, as it's modeled from the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, CCAR, a statewide organization called Terracos came together and they put the curriculum together and they modeled it after CCAR. The CCAR's training originally was a recovery coach training, one of the hang downs of the umbrella services. So currently what we're seeing across the state of Texas is that there's this huge training on recovery coaching, which is only just one of those hang down services from this umbrella. So we need to start looking at what other services do we need to be training on. So the curriculum is going to be looking to expanding not just on recovery coaching, but on these other services as well. So currently what DSHS is doing is updating that material. And one of the awesome things that they're doing is including peers in this tasks. So they're including trainers, and they're including the feedback from peers that have already gone through this training. And I asked if I could leak out some information because the updates won't be ready anytime soon. And they let me leak out a little bit of information. So there'll be more role playing in the curriculum. If you've gone through the curriculum, you know that there's very minimal role playing unless it's impromptu by the trainer. When I train, I like to include role playing day 2, right? Starting that relationship, because we learn by a lot of repetition and practicing, and what better way to learn than in that safety network of that group. Also, yes?
Obviously, in regard to the coaching and supervision of those services, are those things like biological treatment they provided, I said called coaching, but that, job training, life skills training, it was part of my patient treatment program.
Mm-hmm.
Are services that are provided, how are those accessed by, or paid for by insurance or by individuals who are, not in an IOP or
Right.
something like that, or who aren't getting those kind of services per se in an IOP program?
Currently, recovery support services are being paid for by grants, state grants, and federal grants. So there's Mary Gerke back there with Homeward Bound. They received a grant that they're doing some awesome work. And if you haven't met Mary and her team out there at Homeward Bound, you need to tap on her shoulder and ask her what they're doing out there, because they're doing some great work. And we're starting to see a lot of that. But that's only handfuls of grantees across the state of Texas. So I believe the idea is we give them money so that they can do this awesome job, so that they can write about it, so that more money can be given. And unfortunately, in private pay treatment centers, some of those services aren't being covered, or they're lumped under a big ol' service fee. What I've seen happen, especially in these last 2 years, is something called a gold rush. They're charging a lot for urinalysis. They're charging insurances for urinalysis, and to kind of cut the guilt, and that's my opinion, all my opinion. Just to cut the guilt, now it's on camera. To cut the guilt, they're providing extra services so that, you know, it's not just paying for urinalysis, but it's paying for recovery support services like that as well. More self-care is going to be addressed in and earlier on in the week, because by day 5, we're in the current curriculum, we're addressing self-care, and on day 5 everybody's exhausted and they don't want to talk about self-care. As a matter of fact, self-care is like, can we leave early, right? So they're moving it up a little bit forward on in the week. Also too, the state has gotten a grant around smoking cessation, so we'll have an hour of smoking cessation in the training curriculum. And it's going to be really difficult, because I know that of those 100-some trainers that are going to be training coaches, that, you know, a good half of them smoke. So that will be, it is what it is, right? We're going to be learning and discussing more about motivational interviewing and what it looks like in the peer context. What we've seen a lot in the curriculum, well, in hands-on training, is that we talk about motivational interviewing, and all of a sudden the peers, you know, put on a faux counselor hat, and the tone changes, and how does this make you feel? Oh, when you say this, I'm like, really? Do you really talk that way, right? So motivational interviewing looks considerably different in that peer way. We add a little peerness to it, right? Initial engagement. HR Consulting has kind of suggested that a certain kind of approach in that initial engagement, instead of coming into the relationship saying, hey, how can I help you? What do you need? Kind of, you know, using not only motivational interviewing, but helping to build that relationship in that initial engagement. So there'll be information about that. Also, group facilitation. There's a lot of, again, a peer recovery support specialist is doing all these different roles, so they should also be doing group facilitation. And what oftentimes happens is that you put a peer in a group setting, and they want to run a peer-led group like a 12-step meeting, right? And so it's not to say that that's wrong. It's just that we want to look outside the box. And also, too, it may be able to, you know, reach out to more individuals if we're having changing our approach on peer-led groups. And it's going to prepare individuals more for the IC and RC exam. Two of the things that aren't currently in the IC and RC exam that may or may not be an exam, and I can't say that this is going to be an exam because I had the privilege of helping to write some of the exam questions, is that we're missing a lot of the international or the SAMHSA material. So like the 8 dimensions of wellness, scribble that down if you haven't taken an exam, study that, and also to the 10 guiding principles. 10 guiding principles, yes, 10 guiding principles of recovery. So that's added in there, as well as some other material that, you know, somebody may confront and on the test. Show of hands, who has taken the exam? No one? One? Yes? Javi, how do you, a little feedback for, you know, your colleagues here on your experience with that exam?
It was a lot on advocacy.
Uh-huh.
A lot on the role models, and a lot of the questions, it seemed like there was 2 good answers, but it says, you know, pick the best.
Yeah.
But it was a good test. It it was on all the core topics that were pretty much told that they were going to be on.
Program 2 years ago, and now he's coming back into this program. You know. So what? They have like X amount of different types of exams with a whole bunch of different questions on them, and they're constantly rewriting the exams. The process that they have is they have those 4 domains that they test on. Then they break down each of those domains into tasks. What tasks you should do for that domain. And then they break down that task even further into all the knowledges and the skills that you should have in order to do that task. And that's the way they help to write those questions and to come up with the question. And so something that I liked about the exam process or writing it was that it was very participatory. Everybody who helped to come up with these questions were people in recovery on both the MH and the SU side, and really collaborated. And you talk about passion, right? They put us in small groups in order to come up with some of these questions, because one question would take us a good 45 minutes to dissect or to rewrite, because so-and-so wouldn't be happy about this. It doesn't speak to MH, it doesn't speak to SU. So it's well thought out. Now there's a school of thought that peers shouldn't be certified, shouldn't have to get certified, and maybe a addiction professionals organization shouldn't be certifying peers or even accrediting peers. Well, the truth of the matter of the fact is that they beat us to the punch. So within the recovery movement, we have the opportunity to pull our stuff together in order to kind of accredit our own people, but we didn't get there fast enough and they beat us to the punch. And we're needing a way to not only train, but also support and hold people accountable when they're not acting ethically, as mentioned before, right? So what we start to see across the state of Texas, especially here in Austin, are ANDA services. I'm a recovery coach and a monitor. I'm a recovery coach and a house manager. So rarely do we see just organizations that just have peer recovery coaches that are just doing recovery coaching. And so we're starting to see a lot of this stuff that's falling under that peer recovery support specialist umbrella. So we have a whole group of people that are married to this one way of thought. I'm trained as a recovery coach. We're only doing recovery coaching, even though I'm certified to do all of this stuff. And they're saying poo-poo on you because you're doing monitoring, you're doing all of this stuff, and you're saying that you're doing coaching. Well, there's a whole bunch of confusion around this. So this certification is to certify peer recovery support specialists, that huge umbrella doing all these different tasks. Yes, sir.
Does the state allow you to have a license or be a CI, let's say, and get that certification as a peer recovery coach? They do?
Yes, they do, unfortunately.
Also on the mental health side, also, right, because in all reality, I kind of fall under both.
Mm-hmm.
But, it would be, it's just the insight. That's what that's why I would actually like to get something like this. And sitting in this group is extremely educational, and I thank you for giving it, giving this presentation. But yeah, afterwards I'll ask you about a little bit more information about the certification process, because I'd like to go there.
There's a few different states that actually have in their certification process a form that says, if you sign this, you are saying that you are a peer, and you are breaking your own anonymity, and you're a peer, so people are going to know that you're in recovery of sorts. Texas hasn't done that yet, and what that does is it not only kind of outs people, so to speak, but also too it really kind of hones this role to be for peers, right? I personally think it's a great idea that we say, hey, you know what, this role is a peer role, right? Peers in the title, so peers should be getting this role.
Yeah, and I brought that up because on the mental health side, even those individuals who say they self-medicate, there's that addiction aspect of self-medication. And people tend to minimize that. So, I mean, I pretty much fall under both ROs. I've dealt with depression in the past. I'm very honest with my patients about that. I limit the amount of information that I provide to patients, but making that connection helps a little bit.
Yeah.
And honesty helps also. But yeah, that's why I was interested in that. I really would, because there's a misnomer out there. Where I work at, we were basically, it wasn't said outright, but it was made to feel like if you're an LCDC or a CI or a QMHP, that you cannot get those certifications, that they aren't available to you. But I'm really happy that I
mean,
did this.
and they are, and what a lot of people come across the problem is that when, at the end of the day, a licensed professional, they're held accountable to that license. So in some of the things that we do as peers,
And what your role is, what you
may go against that license.
right?
And we talk about that in the training. And we discuss this, right? So we talk about one of the roles being transportation. A licensed professional may not provide transportation or meet somebody out at their home because they got their first apartment and they're throwing a house party, right? I mean, a sober house party, right? So, yeah, it's very difficult. So one of the things that we've come across, our peers have come across, is that, pushback from the clinical world is that, oh, we're being, mini counselors, and not really, no. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we integrate those services and how we start to play well with each other. And if we work together, then less people fall through the cracks on that. So, yeah, LCDCs could get the certification. But when all's said and done, you're an LCDC. And you have to, abide by your license. Right? So I want you to ask yourself, are you providing ANDA services? Where are you working? When Recovery People, we put out that survey, we got a lot of feedback saying that a lot of peers are working in collegiate recovery programs, recovery high schools, sober living, recovery community centers, recovery community organizations, residential recovery centers, which is like a level 4 sober living residential facility. Also 2 treatment centers, HIV and AIDS outreach workers, or programs, and also transitional living centers. So in those areas, it's very rare that you'll find a peer just doing one job, right? And just, we all wear a lot of many hats in this process, and it's always good to remember that if you're being certified as a peer recovery support specialist, this huge umbrella, that you'll be doing a lot of these different jobs. So it's also good to know what those different jobs are, so that you can educate your colleagues and even the clinicians that you're working with. One of the reasons why they're going through this training is because they want to be educated on this role and how we fit into this process. So how do you know when you are operating outside of your hula hoop? Supervision. When in doubt, check it out. When in doubt, check it out. So supervision, why is supervision important? Anyone? Bueller?
Accountability.
Accountability? Uh-huh. Instruction, okay. Support, absolutely. Remember that, yes.
One thing you know that you bring outside of the scope, when you go to training, it tells you the role as a recovery coach, the role as a counselor, and the role as a sponsor. We're not sponsors, we're not counselors. And when you talk about specialists, that involves a variety of we get that. All of that, cigarette cessation, group facilitation, we have to transport, all that falls under that umbrella. And you have to know, what your role is. You know, if I have a problem, when I do a motivation interview, I have a counselor that I can call to come and, take care of that class, because I'm not a counselor. So I don't have no business trying to counsel a peer. I need to let that be the job of a counselor. But we have taught that. If you take the course, that's brought out.
That's right. That's right. So take home is that you are a peer recovery support specialist doing recovery coaching, a peer recovery support specialist providing transportation, a peer recovery support specialist, fill in the blank. So this is that speaks to the and the services, right? So supervision, when in doubt, check it out. Supervision can look 3 different ways, right? You could be shadowing that individual, kind of, you're doing a good job, pat on the back, right? Following them. It could be done individually, one-on-one supervision, and also to group supervision. So we're starting to see that. 2 main purposes. Yes, Mary.
So, we do supervision in Homeward Bound, and the way that we have been doing it, number one, we do it 2 different ways. We have Michelle Him, who is our clinical director. She comes in and does the supervision just specifically with the coaches and our peer navigator that work at Homeward Bound. And that's more of a, what do I want to say, that's more laid back. We're just kind of talking about issues that we're having. But then we also have supervision with the clinical team. And what's happened with that is that we're more instrumental in being a part of the recovery planning and all of that stuff. And that's what's going on in Homeward Bound as far as, because that was a struggle with us at first, was the clinicians and the recovery coaches all coming together. And that has actually begun to happen. Wonderful. Where we're actually working together now on doing recovery planning or whatever else. They send me an email and say, hey, I've got 2 peers that I really think need a coach or want a coach or whatever, and then I assign them. But we're working more together. And, as far as like us being able to transport and meet people, go to their houses and do all that stuff, that was stuff that Homeward Bound was not able to do in the past until this came about. So we're able to get in the community with people and meet them where they're at, which is awesome.
And that speaks to a lot of the education that you've done organizationally. So supervision, people wanted peers to be supervised by clinicians. Well, some clinicians don't know what we're doing and don't know how we operate. So supervision was subpar, really below, right? And so what we need to do as peers is really advocate for the type of support that we need, right? If you are going to supervise me, please know what I'm doing, right? So clinical supervision in that sense, I know Michelle knows what you're doing and what your role is, what you do and what you don't do, right? And also how to really engage. If you're going to engage a peer at this kind of level with supervision, it may not work, right? If we get, circle up, a little bit of coffee, because anytime there's a circle and a coffee, we're in, right? Supervision's going to take on that more supportive field for that peer. So 2 main purposes of supervision are to protect the welfare of those seeking services, our customers, right? But also 2, to promote ongoing development for our peers, right? That's another customer. The peers within the organizations should be customers as well. We want happy campers. So here are 4 key components to supervision. Administrative, this is looking at managing program scheduling and personnel. Educational, orienting, training, coaching on engagement, on how people are performing. Supportive teaching about burnout and good self-care practices. And evaluative. Say that fast 10 times. Observing and offering feedback on workers' strengths and limitations. So we look at those 4 areas. So supervision starts to look a little bit more expansive in this sense, right? While supervision is commonly associated with professional counseling, the need is great for peers, most likely even greater. The following are some benefits that supervision can offer peer mentors and peer recovery coaches. By the way, my good pal Bob Carty up in Chicago did a lot of great work on supervision, especially what it looks like in peer-to-peer work. So I got material from him. So increased role clarity and expectations, ongoing training in various aspects of recovery, orientation to available resources in the community, stronger sense of connection with the project or the team. This is what Mary was talking about. Valuable supports, especially in face of numerous stressors. If people are doing outreach work and are going to, the barrio and the hood, they're going to probably need a lot of support. New insight on how to engage those who may be ambivalent about seeking the recovery process or recovery services, becoming more culturally competent, and helping coaches and mentors with goals, doing the work that they do. Avi.
Something that's kind of helped us out at Communities for Recovery, once a week we'll get all the coaches together, and we'll if someone has like a scenario that is kind of out there, obviously we won't use any names, but that just to get a lot of different, heads thinking and input is definitely helped us at Communities for Recovery.
Right, so kind of a group dialogue on how to, maneuver, navigate, manage certain cases or situations. So why is it also important? Because we're being watched. We are, right? Again, Joe Schmo went through our program 2 years ago, and now he's coming back into this program. Unfortunately, we are being looked at, kind of skeptically, right? So we need to be able to provide that appropriate supervision so that we are acting ethically.
I'm pretty interested in becoming certified recovery coach. In the training, are they taught, documentation and studying documentation?
Documentation is really tricky because there isn't a set document that is used across the board. When it comes to recovery planning, the more popular are RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, and WHAM, Whole Health Action Management. But aside from that, documentation is left to the organization and the accountabilities that they have to either their funders or to insurance or to mom and dad or whomever. So documentation can be very basic, and I'm pretty sure that in the past what we're seeing is more of the numbers, right? Age, race, are you going to meetings, how is this effective, just kind of getting to see the numbers. It's really hard to kind of gauge recovery and recovery in simple dialogue.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is as this profession becomes more and more scrutinized by the state, nationally, you could potentially have that documentation to support the validity of what you're doing and also the outcomes of the benefits that they have on the clients. And we can use that to go to them and say, mental health recovery coaches are being compensated
Right, so there's,
Written is, so there's a little, got some more solidarity.
yeah, there's evidence-based practice, and we like to say that we're practice-based evidence. Our stuff works, and you know, over time we start to see it. Yes, Tom?
Yeah, a couple of things. I agree with you, but I think also it's creating a balance so that there's not this onerous paperwork put on peers in terms of documentation, and also possibly violating the peer relationship in terms of telling on and doing those kinds of things that may be more clinically involved. So I think that needs to be sort of sorted out and figured out. But I also just want to reiterate what Joseph's saying about all eyes are on us. Because of the stigma we carry in our lives, I think we have a double standard that we're operating against all the time, and that we have to be really extra vigilant with the work we do, have as much peer purity and clarity as possible, because we are being judged, I think, in some situations extra harshly. So
Yeah.
I want to reiterate that.
Thanks, Tom. And you know, also too with documentation, you know, with conversations with the Department of State Health Services, currently their grantees, they're telling their coaches, yeah, you have to fill out this information, but don't spend too much time on it. So they get that, you know, there's information that has to be collected, but they don't want that to be the center of that, you know, relationship with the peer. Mary?
Well, you know, one of the grantees on a grant, and what we really do right now, it's not hard. I mean, we'll do like a recovery plan, recovery wellness plan with them. We set goals, we give referrals, and we follow up on those referrals. You know, because we want to make sure that we're getting good referrals, of course. And another thing that we've done is we've been able to start building a really big resource for all of Homeward Bound, and eventually, you know, for whoever. But the paperwork is not difficult,
Yeah.
you know, that we've been using so far. It's not difficult at all.
What are the issues associated with HIPAA in some of this stuff? Because, you know, obviously we're looking at now clinicals or medical information, you know, that's across psych services and all that stuff. How is HIPAA involved in this?
Depending on organization, right? It's depending on organization. I know with Homeward Bound, they provide clinical services, so they're bound by HIPAA. In recovery community organizations, recovery community centers, maybe not so much. I know Communities for Recovery, they are a JCO accredited, so they are bound by that HIPAA. But other recovery community organizations, I mean, best rule of thumb is like, you know, what is said here. What is said here?
Stays here.
There you go. You're awake. We're getting to lunch. We're getting to lunch.
If y'all are in, you know, and I'm new in this, so please, you know, forgive me, I'm not trying to assume I know. So if I do work for state, and I do the documentation for, you know, necessity. If, you know, certainly one way to take this profession to the next level, to ensure pay, to ensure billing, is to have some statistics. That's what insurance companies want to see, is statistics of outcomes such that can justify the services, which I agree with Tom. There's a confidentiality there that you have to hold by, and the willingness of that individual to want to open up to you. If you feel like that could be violated, they're not going to. I understand. It's very sensitive knowing that. But again, if you're wanting to take it into that realm of getting higher pay, you gotta have some credibility. I don't know.
So-
Credibility that show us.
And you know, fortunately, through those grants and collecting that information, we're able to do that. You know, granted, everybody doesn't receive grants, so they can't collect those numbers. But you know, I know some organizations that aren't receiving state money or federal money, and the information that they're collecting is kind of basic, and it's within conversation, and I mean, it doesn't paint a picture of, by all means, but it does give somebody an idea of how recovery support services and recovery coaching is beneficial. So again, supervision is very important because we don't want, because eyes are on us, and there have been ethical situations across the state of Texas. And unfortunately, just like, on the news, we don't hear about all the good stuff, we hear about all the bad stuff. People acting unethically. And so through certification, we're able to kind of put, individuals on a naughty list and remove their certification, and they'd have to appeal to get that back. So ethically, supervision helps to make sure that a lot of people are acting ethically. Wah, wah. So workforce leadership development. Remember, we are living proof that recovery and peer recovery support services work. And we have a huge impact on the wave of recovery movement and the availability of peer recovery support services. So we need to stay educated on not only our role, but what's happening across the state and nationally with this whole recovery movement. So it's our responsibility to educate our colleagues, our community, and even the people that we're working with. So some ways to get involved: be accessible and available. How am I doing on time? What time am I supposed to be done?
5 minutes over.
5 minutes over. Okay, I'm wrapping it up. I'll be available as well. Yes, food is here. Ways to get involved: be accessible and available, support each other, keep informed about the field, get active in statewide efforts, engage the community, engage with your local efforts. Also, too, if you haven't gone to a ROSC meeting, a Recovery Oriented Systems of Care meeting, it should be a system of care. If peers go into a ROSC meeting and it turns into this, this networking thing, then raise your hand and say, hey, what are we doing to put a system in place so my friends and my family members don't die, right? And hold them accountable too. So a cute little picture before we leave. I like to see a ROSC as a spider web, right? If all those connective tissues, those connective areas are organizations, they may be operating in silos and not communicate with each other, but us little loops, those little connective areas, if those are us as peer recovery support specialists, then we are able to kind of float from one organization to the next, right? And connect one organization to the next with different services and whatnot, so that if a fly lands anywhere in this web, the whole web feels it. All the organizations feel it. So if Mary was just a housing provider and someone needed clothing, and Mike over here, his organization does all this clothing, well, she does a great job over there, but she doesn't provide any clothing. But as a recovery support specialist, that coach, that PRS, could take the individual from Mary's organization, walk them to Mike's organization, and all this stuff happens in a system of care, right? But of course, those agreements need to be put into place. Some ROSC elements, we're heavy. Our role is very important in a ROSC. And remember, a peer recovery support specialist, everyone is a resource. Everyone that you meet is a resource. So if you met somebody this past weekend, they know somebody that can help somebody that you're working with. So if you started to engage those relationships, if you approached everybody as a potential resource to saving lives, you'd be paying attention to them, you'd be getting the first and the last name, and what they're passionate about and how they can help you help others. As an organization, I've talked about collaboration, collaborate, get out of your silos, and help to bridge those gaps in services. We don't have any time for questions, but I'll be here all weekend, and my contact information.
Unfortunately,
Thank you.